afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi, let me welcome you all to the ICS Wednesday seminar. The theme for today's discussion is Managing China's Domestic Economic Governance. We're extremely glad to have with us Santosh Pai as the chair for this webinar. He has been offering legal services to clients in the India-China corridor since 2010. His area of interest includes Chinese investments in India, India-China comparative law and policy, cross-cultural negotiations, and border governance. He is currently a partner at Link Legal, an Indian law firm. He's a member of CII's core group on China. He also teaches 2 courses on India-China business at IIM Shillong and volunteers at NGOs in his free time. Our first speaker for the day is Myung Zhang. He's associate professor at China Public Finance Institute, Shanghai University of Finance and Economics. He graduated from Peking University with PhD in economics in 2013. His research focuses on political economy and public economics of China's local authorities. His recent work focuses on local political business cycle, various forms of local government debt, and efficiency of local public investment. Our second speaker for the day is Chu Sheng Hao. He's a professor of economics in the University of International Business and Economics. Before he moved to Beijing, he taught in National University of Singapore. His main research fields are microeconomics, public economics, and income inequality. His research work investigates how the government policies balance the efficiency and equity of the economy. Our final speaker for the day is Arvind Yellery. He's a senior research fellow at the Peking University, Beijing. He teaches and curates courses on Peking University and at select universities globally and at few Indian institutes of management in India. He's also a visiting fellow at Fudan School for Management, Shanghai. Prior to joining Peking University, he was associate fellow and assistant director at the Institute of Chinese Studies, Delhi. Before I invite the chair to begin the proceedings, let me lay out the housekeeping rules. All participants, except for the speaker, shall be muted for the duration of the webinar. Participants are requested to send in their questions via the chat box or use the raise hand option. Please unmute yourself only when called to do so by the chair. I will now invite the chair to begin the proceedings. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Surabhi, for kicking us off, and welcome everyone to this edition of Wednesday seminar, where we will cover a topic titled Managing China's Domestic Economic Governance. And this is a part of our series in the lead up to a major conference coming up later in the year, which is on domestic governance in China, which is scheduled to be held on September 9th and 10th. That will include panels on the party, the Chinese economy, science and technology, PLA, role of provinces, and implications for foreign policy. So this is the second event in this series, and we hope you will continue to follow these events in the lead up to the conference. Now, coming to today's seminar, as we all know, China's economy has grown at a frantic pace. And for many observers, from an external viewpoint, it looks like China has managed to grow its trade, attract foreign investment, privatize its SOEs, join the WTO, promote Chinese investments going overseas, develop a fantastic theme called Belt and Road Initiative. So it looks like the Chinese economy can pivot and focus on different directions almost at will. But surely there must be some tensions for the largest economy in the world to make such quick changes in direction must be difficult. So what are some of these fault lines? Today we hope to examine a few challenges, a few delicate issues which require maybe a finer balance, more attention. So today, to do this, we have 3 experts with us, Professor Zhang, Professor Chu, and Dr. Yellery. So Dr. Zhang will now cover the topic of local government debt. For many China observers, this is a familiar topic, yet It has several dynamics with it. How did it originate? How did it develop? And what is its current state? And what is the central government doing to kind of balance or help out provinces which are facing severe issues on this front? And then we have Dr. Chu, who will follow up with what is the market power of firms in China. We just saw a huge backlash against technology companies. Is the state reclaiming the private domain of companies? And what are its implications for the labor market? And so on. And is there a better tax scheme that China can develop to maybe balance some of these concerns? And lastly, we will have Dr. Yelleri, who will focus on the industrial transformation. How is China trying to restructure its industry to improve efficiency, to rebalance towards a domestic consumption-driven economy? So these are some of the topics we hope to cover. And we also hope you from the audience will raise many more questions and enrich our seminar this afternoon. So with that, I would welcome Dr. Zhang to, I believe he has a PowerPoint presentation. So Dr. Zhang, you could take 15 minutes now, and I'll then request Dr. Zhu and Dr. Yelleri to follow with 15 minutes each. Audience questions can be raised at any time in the chat box. But at the end of the first set of remarks, we will dig into some of those questions. And then I will offer each speaker 5 additional minutes to make supplementary remarks and also address some of the questions. Thank you. Professor Zhang, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thank you. Let me share my slide with you. And could you see the slide rolling? Yeah, I'm working on the problem of local government debt as well as the investment during the several years. So today I will make a brief introduction on the policy tools to mitigate the local government debt risk. This is a question, a problem which has been raised by the central government since the late 2014. So let me first introduce about something about the origin of the development of local government debt risk in China. So there are several analyses on why they have been accumulated to the current amount. So the first one, the first argument about the accumulation of government debt, local government debt, is about the 1994 tax sharing system. So in 1994, China has had a new fiscal system, which was very different from what it was in the 1980s, early 1990s. So one of the results of this reform is that we can see from this figure. Previously, this blue line is the local revenue share among the total revenue, and the orange line is the local expenditure share among the total expenditure nationwide. So in the 1980s, we can see that in the first half of the 1980s, the local revenue is greater than the expenditure, and whereas in the late 1980s through 1993, we can see that it is roughly balanced. But the 1994 reform resulted in a gap or a deficit of local fiscal budget. We can see that there's a difference. The local revenue dropped from like 70% of the nation to about 50%, but the local expenditure still accounts for about 70%. So many scholars and analysts argue that it is this deficit which contributes to the accumulation of local government debt that move all the way to 2020. So that was one popular argument, but I want to say that this is quite misleading, because this gap is not financed with debt. this gap is financed with the fiscal transfer from the central government to the local. So the central government did collect more share of the total revenue, but it paid transfer to the local government as for the concern of the equalization across different regions. So it collects more from the eastern and more developed areas and transfer more to the western and underdeveloped areas. So the transfer can close this gap. This gap is about 20 or 25% of the total revenue, but it is covered by transfer. So there's nothing about that prior to 2015, but later there's a small amount of debt, but the major part to cover this so-called deficit is the transfer from the central government. So I want to say that this argument about that the new tax sharing system in 1994 contributes to the accumulation or the risk of local government debt is somewhat misleading. So the real reason, I believe, is the rapid urban development or urbanization, as you can see on this figure. The urbanization in terms of the urban share of population was about 25 or 30% in the late 1980s, but it grew rapidly since 1995. You can see there's a kink. There's a kink here. There's a kink. The growth of urban of the slope of this line grow faster, which coincides with the time period of the tax sharing system in 1994. So there's a rapid rise. So currently the system, the urbanization ratio is about 65% or 2/3 of the population. So with the rapid urbanization, we have invested heavily on infrastructures. Taking the transportation infrastructure as an example, you can see that in the late 1980s in China, we have the first expressway, the high-speed highway, and now the expressway is about 160,000 kilometers nationwide, and also we have built a nationwide railway system. The railway also has counted to about 150,000 kilometers nationwide. So these rapid urbanization, together with the heavy investment in transportation infrastructure, as well as other types of urban infrastructure, requires a large amount of funds. Moreover, I have to know that in 2008, the Chinese government decided to respond to the global financial crisis with a so-called 4 trillion yuan stimulus program. So at that time, the local government were not allowed. So the local government were not allowed to issue debt within the budget. As I say, all the deficit is covered by the transfer from the central. So the local government were not allowed to issue debt within the budget in accordance with the budget law at that time. But at the national level or the central level, the State Council just wished to expand the the finances through some issuing some corporate bonds, so to support the local government-led investment project. That was in December 2008, and then later during March in 2009, the central bank also relaxed some regulatory requirements for the so-called local government financing vehicle. So the local government financing vehicle composed a large fraction, or as a major source of so-called local government debt during that period, starting 2009 until 2014. So these bonds are corporate bonds, so they are issued by a company or state-owned enterprise, but for the sake of the local government's use. So the local governments collect these funds to invest in many infrastructure programs. So during that time, there was a large boom of these LFGV bonds, and usually they are guaranteed by local government. So this was the path of this explosion of the LFGV bound, which I used in one of my research. So in 2009, it was very slight, about 0.3 or 0.4 trillion yuan, but it had become larger and larger. And in 2012, 2013, about almost 1 trillion yuan, and it's become larger and larger. And the last point of the origin of the local government bond is the political incentive, because with the development, one of the important reasons that China achieved high economic growth is China has a unified government or bureaucracy system. It is believed that in China we have a top-down GDP target setting. With the researchers have focused on the local officials' incentive to not only meet the target set by their superior, but they want to compete to achieve higher performance. So when they do better, they are more likely to be selected to become a new superior, so they are promoted. And there was a tenure mismatch between the tenure of city leaders, as I have found that the city leaders' average tenure of China is about 3.5 years, but the maturity of these municipal bonds or LFGV bonds is concentrated around 7 years. So you can see from this statistics, about more than 3/4 of these bonds matured in 7 years. So there is a mismatch between the bond and the maturity of the bond and the tenure of the local leaders. So my conjecture is that the local leaders will not worry about whether the city were able to repay the bond or not, because they were most likely to leave this position early. That was the situation during that period. And now the central government has enforced the new regulation that these officials need to be responsible for the debt issued during their tenure, regardless of their status later. So the central government has discovered the problem and make some remedy to this problem. So let me introduce some efforts of the central government to mitigate the risk in 2014. So the reason that these efforts were started since 2014 is the 2013 National Audit Report, and followed with the 2014 revise of the budget law and the so-called number 43 document. And so this was one of the tables I translated from the Chinese version to the English. So in 2014, the gross domestic product, the GDP was, so this is in the Chinese version translated. So in China, we use the unit is in let me 100 million CNY. I just read all the numbers. So GDP was about 59. Let me see how to read this one. This could be 59 trillion. This is billion, right? This is, I'm not sure about the data because we use a different system of numbers. So you may compare. There are three levels of three types of debt. The first is a debt to be repaid by the local government. And then the second is the debt guaranteed by local government. And there's another one is the debt of potential relief. In some circumstances, the government need to pay some of the debt as a relief. So the latter two was called the contingent debt. So we have four levels of local governments: the province, the prefecture, the county, and the township. So we find that the prefecture level accounts for almost half of the debt, and the province accounted for a major part of contingent debt. So the debt was about 11 trillion here. And if we add up all the debt with the contingent debt, that will account for about 1/3 of the total GDP. So the central government started to worry about we call the risk or the sustainability of this mounting local government debt. So in 2004, there are two major issues concerning the debt risk. One is the new budget law, and the other is the document, the so-called number 43 new document. The main point concerning local government debt is to allow provincial governments to issue within budget local government bonds under the supervision of the central government. So central government will assign caps of the new bond to each province each year. Excuse me, I just add one. There's a misspell each year. So the central government supervised by assigning caps. So the central government started to decide how much each province can issue.
Professor Zhang, I'm very sorry. Can you please wrap up in 2 minutes? You will get one more turn to complete your remarks, but please, thank you.
Yeah, okay. 2 minutes. Yeah. So no, just let me quick. So after this one, the central government still tried to deal with the large amount of existing off-budget corporate LFGVs, and by screening, classifying these bonds into government and non-government uses, and replace these government uses into local government bonds, and with lower interest rates, and remove government guarantees on those of non-government uses. And the central government also encouraged other financing sources like the public-private partnership, but the PPP started a boom in 2014, but in 2017 it became unpopular because the local government illegitimately provided guarantee for the debt, which violated the central government's regulation. And then, and to be quick, so the central government, let me explain the dilemma of the central government and local government. The central government need to pace the deleveraging amid the economic slowdown and the COVID-19, and also you need to find it difficult to allocate the caps of the debt because in China there's a large discrepancy across regions, and the local government is subject to the central government supervision. There is a problem of mismatch of projects, which if I have time, I can explain later. So we can see that since 2017, there's a reversal of the outstanding local government debt as a proportion of GDP. It decreased from 24 to 20, and then rebounded. Now it is 2026. So the problem has not yet solved. So for the future, we have to stick to three main principles. One is to balance the economic growth with risk alleviation. We may need to assign higher caps of local government debt within the budget, and we encourage the PPPs again. And we need to stick to the no bailout principle by the central government, but we need to allow scattered cases of default of LFGV bonds, which happened during the past 3 or 4 years, but it was scattered cases, not general. And we may allow the bailouts of these bonds within the province, but the central government will not bail out. And last, we need to prevent the new risk during the process of risk alleviation. This is a new principle proposed by the central government this year. So to my understanding, we need to keep a moderate pace of deleveraging, not too fast. And we need to monitor the project financed with the within budget local government bonds, so that the projects go smooth and some of the projects can repay these government bonds in like 5 to 10 years when these bonds mature, so that they will make the risk lower. So that is a brief introduction about the China's local government debt issue. We may discuss later if we have time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. A lot of interesting ideas. I'm sure we'll come back to some of them. Professor Chu?
Yes. So let me first share my screen, share my slides. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you see the slide PPT?
Yes, we can see the slide, but
oh yeah, sorry. I know. I have to.
Yeah. Now it's changing, but maybe you can try full screen.
Yeah, I try to see that. Okay, so okay. So what I will talk about the one of the challenges.
Is it possible, Professor? Is it possible to have a full screen view, because we can see the slides changing, but they're still not in the full screen mode?
Oh, it's not. Let's see how to make it full screen.
Professor, the button on the right corner,
next to
next to 108%, where it says 108%, right next to it.
Next to it, yes.
Oh, no.
Okay, it's okay, Professor. I think it's better you continue now. We can see the slides, and I think your bullet points are very clear, so that's fine. You can proceed.
I will talk about one of the challenges for the domestic economic governance of China. So I think right now one of the hot topics in China is the wealth income inequality, wealth inequality, and but basically I think those enlarging income inequality is one of the deep root is the market power of this huge economy, huge firms, especially in the new economy, so-called new economy. For example, like this bigger platforms, Alibaba and TikTok, and some firms may not be so well known outside China, like Meituan, Ele.me. These firms, they mainly one problem is they have hold excess profits, actually huge profits. I mean, then they mainly they have some secret strategies to earn huge profits that they mainly use algorithm, this data economy. So that is not only for they have a huge business income, but also they have this bad implications for the labor market. We see the firm and the platform become bigger and bigger, but then we didn't see the quick increase of labor income. On the one hand, the housing price, rise up very quickly, and on the other hand, the stagnation of this or the relatively slow growth rate of wages. So recently, people see that maybe one of the reason is due to the algorithm. Those huge platforms, they use algorithm as a new way to distributing income across these employees in these bigger firms. What they do? They will all these compensations is due to horse race. It's like your performance is a relative performance, relative to yourself, relative to your colleagues. So because all of the performance of your colleagues are recorded in the computer, and then everybody's performance is relative to the is judged is compared to their colleagues, and then that determines their wages or payments. This is like finally that creates a so-called prisoner dilemma, and or common good or common tragedy or something like that. The typical examples in the economic textbook. So that's why the firms, the huge firms, they can use market power to extract profits from market and at the same time suppress the labor wages. But that also creates a lot of new jobs. Anyone with a car or even smartphone can earn money. For example, they can work as a Uber driver, or they can work as a host on TikTok to earn money. So that is the mechanism within the macro labor market. But if we look at the data, household data, we will find like that is the income inequality data in 2017 and 2019. This is from more than 30,000. The survey of more than 30,000 households. We see like the top 1% is almost like 15%. It's comparable to the US, I mean, in terms of income shares. But for China, this is, I mean, if we compare this number historically with the previous situation in China, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this is the number is increasing. So we see a serious income inequality problem. In terms of wealth inequality, the top 1% is definitely lower than those of in US. Than those in US, because in US the top 1% hold like 1/3 of or 33% of the whole of the total wealth in US. But in China it's about like 15%. But the, one reason is the data quality is not so good in China. We didn't have a lot of samples of rich people in our survey. So that is this is the whole picture of this wealth inequality and income inequality that draws a lot of discussions in the in government, in policy circle and academia in China. So recently, China government launched new policies trying to deal with this income inequality and wealth inequality. One hot topic is this the government are trying to reform the tax scheme. For example, previously, China, the government revenue relies on this commodity tax or value-added tax. But then in US, the main government revenue are from income tax, the so-called direct tax. So whether China should switch from this commodity tax to income tax, that is the discussion topic. But then I think next point is the progressivity of income taxation is still low in China. Most of people agree that we should increase this progressivity of income taxation scheme. Not the top the top bracket, the highest marginal tax rate is marginal tax rate of income tax is 45%. So some people think we should increase the top tax rate. But the other controversial issue is when government collect this, previously when government collected this income tax, actually government may use the revenue to subsidize firms or entrepreneurs. That's one of the possible reasons actually to increase this income inequality after the redistribution. So whether government should increase the subsidies to the poor household instead of to the entrepreneurs is now also how the discussion point is also a concern for the research people in China. So that means later on, China may increase the social welfare or enlarge and increase the subsidy in the social welfare program. Other possible solutions is how to regulate this excess profits of those big platforms or huge firms. That is very challenging because some regulations may not be consistent with market competition. So that means we have to use the so-called mechanism design, combine this kind of planning economy and market economy. And that is using some force outside the market mechanism, or we want to find some new mechanism to balance this income distribution, to balance the efficiency and the equity. Of course, when we talk about we want to reduce the income inequality, it's not that we want to lose the efficiency. We just want to find the balance point of between efficiency, the optimal balance point between efficiency and equity. So of course, we want to increase the, we want to have more competition in the new economy, for example, like IT or telecommunication. And the other issue is whether data is a public good. I think, for example, these big platforms, one of their important assets are data. They collect a lot of data, mobile phone number, even the ID number. Even your traveling, traveling schedule. They can also follow this private information through your smartphone. Then that's one of the reasons they can hold this market power. So I think this one, finally, the government will not. I don't think the government will fully rely on the market mechanism to solve these issues. On the contrary, government will combine the planning mechanism and market mechanism to solve this issue. I think I will stop here. If you have some problems, then we can discuss later.
Thank you, Dr. Zhu. I'm sure we'll come back to you. You have presented very succinctly some of the very important tensions in the Chinese economy. I'll now request Dr. Yeleri to take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And also let me thank Professor Zhu and Professor Zhang for accepting the invitation and presenting their views in this seminar. So this is one of the seminar which is going to build up into something which is bigger, going to happen in November, and we would look forward to your, complete papers and then maybe again participation over the range of issues you have talked about. As far as today's issues concerned, and my area of concern is in the seminar that is underlined. I'm going to talk about the industrial transformations because, sorry, I don't have a presentation, but just 10 to 15 minutes, I'll just present my points. Industrial transformation has been at the core of consecutive national conferences, party meetings, and the various domestic economic governance at the center and at the subnational level in China. If every one of us can recollect, it was this industrial structure, this industrial base, which helped the China to drive its growth, reach the peak of direct investments, the peak of productions, and also dominate the global production chains and supply chains. But in past few years, as we see, China has been adjusting with a lot of shocks and volatilities at the level of supplies, at the level of finances, at the level of capital. One issue which has come to the core and forefront is the industrial capacities and the industrial transformations. Now, China talks about innovation, China talks about fintech, China talks about finances, value additions, all these things. When we put all these ingredients together, it briefly gives an idea. What China is talking about is major dynamic changes in its present form of industrial, transformations, which it wants to use to build or to complete the centenary goals, as well as to fulfill 2035 range of dreams which it wants to accomplish, as well as 2049. The number of issues which industrial transformation has been discussed over a period of time, right away, a couple of weeks back when Li Keqiang was holding a press conference, or even the report which was presented at the State Council, it talked about 5 important ingredients of industrial transformations. The first one is about the demand structure. As everybody knows that China is now taking up the task to flip the economy and make it more demand oriented instead of supply oriented, and those whole range of reforms which have been carried out since 2013 and 14 about improving the supply side channels is forcing or putting more weight on how China can increase the share of consumption in its overall GDP. In 2021, the consumption expenditure in GDP reached somewhere about 44.5%. The second important ingredient of industrial transformation, which China is aiming at, it talks about the urban and rural regional development. When I talk about industrial transformation, it is also important to understand that the overall policy of common prosperity within China domestically is important, and only can be achieved when China tries to balance between the urban and regional development goals. There are more mega cities emerging. Any city which has about permanent population of 10 million and plus are turning into mega cities. Nobody had ever imagined in late 1990s, when Foshan and Tungguan were hosting a range of industries for companies based in Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong, in Macau also, right from textiles, heavy machineries, glass, sanitary wares. You will see that cities like Foshan and Tungguan have become mega cities. Now, this is something which China has to balance it, because this will create more challenges as far as urbanization is concerned for the Chinese government. And this is not only the state council per se, but for the regional government. Recently, about few months back, to be very specific, before China went into a spring festival, the Hong Kong government came up with its plan blueprint to how it is going to deal with this urbanization problem. So industrial transformation is going to create challenges as far as rural and urban development issues are concerned. Third, and importantly, labor productivity. It is the labor, because the cost of labor, as Professor Chu was talking about, the cost of labor is going up, the cost of raw material is going up. So when there are constraints which are rising and raising questions about the profitability of the industries, labor productivity comes to the forefront, and that needs to be dealt with a quite serious regulatory instructions. Fourth and fifth, industrial capacity utilization and the enterprise's efficiency. Because when we talk about industrial capacity, China has been quite lenient, quite tolerant in industries, producing and stockpiling it in warehouses. Now the days have gone when the warehouses mattered the most now, because most of the supply chains are believing that there has to be cheap labor supplemented with the real-time deliveries. So warehouses and all these things are not going to play an important role, especially given Chinese states or Chinese industries intention to improve upon the industrial capacity and efficiency. Coming to the next point, when I talk about industrial transformation, the word per se, what I mean is that if one can go back and check out the contribution of manufacturing industries to the value addition and to the GDP in 2021 has been substantial in number. If we talk about the manufacturing industries, it contributed to 27.4% to the GDP, which was approximately 10 to 12% higher than the previous year, 2020. If one talks about the tertiary industries, that also contributed tremendously to China's GDP, somewhere about 53.3%. That indicates that the industrial transformation is going to go forward and bringing more changes the way Chinese economy or domestic responses are building up. Going by the data which was released by the National Bureau of Statistics, it says that the industrial enterprises accrued a lot of profit in 2021, and the profit compared in percentage compared to 2020 was about 34% higher. So the industrial enterprises accrued approximately 870 billion yuan in profits, approximately $110 billion. That is something shows that how Chinese industrial transformation is at the center and has been followed seriously by the Chinese state. What are the effects of this industrial transformation? The first immediate effect has been the Chinese state attempt and its urgency to reform the demand structure and how it can optimize the demand structure. Second one, I talked about Foshan and Tungquan, but there are many cities which are awaiting to be listed as mega cities, and this will create further longer list of urbanized pockets in China. Third important thing is about the major regional strategies. As these industrial transformations are evolving, are creating new dynamics in China's domestic economy. One can see immediate effect is the rise of major regional strategies, regional coordinated development strategies. For example, China has been talking about since last 4 to 5 years about the Greater Bay Area, where the Greater Bay Area talks about the scheme to link cities like Hong Kong, Macau, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Foshan, and so on and so forth, to create an integrated economic and business hub. How that is going to affect is a major challenge for China, because when I say more and more cities are getting turned into mega cities because of this industrial transformation, that means that the population, which is a permanent population in these cities, has increased. Guangzhou has about 17.66 million people as permanent residents. Shenzhen is matching even 17.3 million. Foshan Tungquan has 10.3 million plus and so forth. That means that the population, which was earlier divided between 50% permanent population and 50% migrated population, is changing. If that is changing, that means that it is underlining the sensitivities with regard to the regional disparity. So Chinese state has to pay closer attention to those issues importantly. More important and more more than that, I think what is a more worrying reason or makes the Chinese provinces and state anxious is about the role of SMEs. When I'm talking about industrial transformation, when there is more value addition, more sectors being explored, given help by the state through subsidies. One is forgetting the role of small and micro enterprises, which have been playing an important role in downstream industries. And the downstream industries have been facing a lot of problems. And these are not the problems by state giving subsidies or not, but the situation has become so much competitive. These industries are succumbing to the losses because of the high production cost, involved production cost. Also, it has been facing a lot of bankruptcies and then applying to the provinces for closures and other things. If SMEs, which contributed substantially to the Chinese economy, including 80% of non-government employment, and it had contributed small enough to China's productions and exports, there is a question about the role of SMEs when the other developing countries are looking towards China to whether or not they can replicate and learn lessons from how SMEs contributed to China's growth. It is important to understand that how Chinese state is going to address some of these issues. And then coming to the important point, the private enterprises. Private enterprises has gone it has gone for a break. It has gone into the hibernation. I keep using this term. Maybe it's more I don't know, but it may intimidate some of you. But SMEs, which were private, have been given or have been sidelined in the due course of time. As a result of it, for example, you have the industries like medicine, electronic, communication equipment, or maybe aerospace, rocket launch and other facilities. Those have been catered by the private enterprises. So if you are talking industrial transformation as your core, core area to change or to govern your domestic economy, there has to be substantial amount of importance with regard to SMEs needs to be taken into consideration. And my last point, all this discussion about industrial transformation, I relate to Xi Jinping's concept of common prosperity, Gongtong for you, wherein he talks about to reducing the gap between rich and poor. It's the simplest definition of common prosperity. And if you relate these two variables now, industrial transformation and common prosperity, there is a close connection. And if you see the components which common prosperity talks about, or the means the common prosperity talks about through which it can be fulfilled, is to mitigate or to address the rising cost of education, healthcare, and housing, right? And now, importantly, industrial transformation is going to affect all these three important variables. And most importantly, as Professor Zhang was pointing out in his presentation about the role of local governments, all the cost with regard to education, welfare, and health has been borne by the local governments. So if the local governments are not having enough budgets, and if there is a rising pressure, budget pressures, there is going to be somewhere unpleasant circumstances the local government and the central government has to pay attention to. As a result of that, there is a void between what China aspires, dreams it wants to fulfill through industrial transformation and the ultimate goal of achieving the common prosperity. And I think that's where I would stop, and I would like to take up questions and maybe answer some of your questions and maybe exchange my opinion views on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Yelleri. Thank you for keeping to the time and also covering a whole wide range of issues. Now, before I turn to the audience, I'll try to pose three questions, one each to the speaker. They can either answer it now, or maybe it's better they answer it collectively with the audience questions. My first question is to Dr. Zhang. Dr. Zhang, you demonstrated very beautifully about how the tax distribution system created an imbalance. And although it was not the direct source of local government debt, in later years, local governments had to issue debt, sitting behind the cover of private enterprises to fund infrastructure development. So this is very interesting. I think this level of nuance is normally missing when people look at local government debt. Now, my question here is, there is a dilemma when it comes to putting a cap on local government debt, because I would imagine some of the more prosperous provinces need, maybe little help, but some of the underdeveloped provinces, especially those in the West, will require to continue issuing debt for quite some time, and also maybe require subsidies. So my question is, if this domestic consumption requires creation of jobs, how will Chinese government try to achieve this balance? Because increasing income tax, as you rightly said, may be one way, but again, that flies in the face of promoting consumption, because if you start taxing income, it's even more difficult to encourage people. And also the new economy, which you spoke about, and these are all low-paying jobs. How do they allow people to afford housing, medical care, and so on, schooling in modern-day China? That's my question to you. Dr. Zhu, I think you made some very important points, and what struck me was subsidies to the poor or entrepreneurs. This is one theme you explored, and China has benefited from entrepreneurship, and modernization of industry again requires incentive, because otherwise private enterprise will die. But you spoke about increasing the subsidies to poor people. So is this some kind of a regressive step where entrepreneurship will be discouraged? Is this by design, or is it something that the state will try to avoid and try to strike a balance? I would like your more detailed thoughts on that. And lastly, coming to Dr. Yelleri, you spoke about industrial transformation and regional integration. This again, redistribution of wealth is paramount, and there is some contradiction if China wants to promote regional integration, because till a few years ago it was looking like they want to replicate Shenzhen in the West, and now it's even more urgent because they want to promote domestic consumption. And also you spoke about SMEs to upgrade industry and to move away from a labor-intensive model. I'm not sure if SMEs are the best vehicles, but of course, that's what China wants to promote, to create jobs. And again, there is a tension here about how do you promote SMEs and industrial modernization at the same time. So maybe you can dwell a little deeper on this when you get your 5 minutes to respond. So I saw some hands, but I no longer see those hands. Anything in the chat box? No. Nirmal Panda? Yes, please. I think I saw your hand first. Please address your question. If you would like to select a speaker and point to them. Can you hear me, Nirmal?
Yes, Mr. Pai, I can hear you. There was some problem with the network. Yeah. In fact, I have got. Are you able to hear me, Mr. Santosh?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. Please proceed.
I have got a couple of questions. In fact, although I'm not a student of economics, but I watch the developments in China closely, being a student of the language. My first question to the panel it's about the panel who spoke at the end was talking about common prosperity. In terms of economic, Chinese economy. And all of us are aware recently in the last year, in fact, the CCDI, the Discipline and Investigation part of the Chinese Communist Party, they cracked down the Alibaba group, including the Alipay. So keeping this in background and comparing Alibaba's rise and then subsequent restrictions on Alibaba with the state-owned enterprise, how do you see this as a kind of a common prosperity? Is the current Chinese government in terms the party trying to put more restrictions on the private firms and thereby giving a kind of a encouragement to the SOEs, or there is something else behind it? This is my first question. And
Nirmal, I'm sorry. We'll come back to you if we have time. I'll allow one question per audience member, and then we can come back. I'm very sorry. Please hold your questions.
Okay, no problem at all. No problem at all.
Sure.
Thank
you. So we have taken note of your question. Dr. Yelleri will respond. I'll now go to the audience questions in the chat box. Ambassador Vijay Nambiar has said, why is property tax proving to be so difficult to implement? In 1994, Chu Rongji had given complete freedom to local governments to mobilize resources on their own, but now the central government is increasingly controlling the local government efforts. How are these issues connected? Perhaps this is a question to Professor Zhang. So please take note of this. The next question is from Director of ICS, Ambassador Ashok Kanta. How important is the common prosperity strategy in the management of the Chinese economy? We noticed this concept was mentioned only once by Premier Li Keqiang in his work report at the latest NPC. Is the objective and strategy of common prosperity being played down now? Maybe Professor Chu can take this question. Then the next one is to Dr. Yelleri again from Nazar Khan. How China's industrial transformation influenced top industries by overcapacity in dealing with the issue of overcapacity. And next question is Ambassador Kishan Rana for either Professor Zhang or Professor Chu. How has the establishment of party units in the subsidiaries of foreign companies worked? Might this have any impact on FDI inflow? And the next question is from Professor Hemant Adlaka. A question on China's SMEs. Concerns have been expressed here regarding the challenges facing especially private SMEs, but the argument put forward by some in China is as against declining exports to the markets in EU and North America. Last year, China's smaller companies saw fast-growing exports to RCEP member countries. In fact, it is further claimed in China that this year the SMEs are eyeing greater growth, thanks mainly to RCEP markets. Dr. Yelleri, maybe because he mentioned SMEs in his presentation. So thank you for those questions. I'll now start in the reverse order and maybe request Dr. Yelleri to respond to the questions addressed to him, and then we'll come to Professor Chu and Professor Zhang.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you for the questions everybody has put forth. I'll start with the first question from the chair about the SMEs and the automation. When I said SMEs will play a crucial important role in the industrial transformation, it did not necessarily mean the automation, because SMEs provide a lot of ancillary services and ancillary support to the mainstream industries. And gone were the days when the SMEs would compete with the mainstream industries and outcompete them. Now SMEs job has been reduced to the secondary level, support level in the provinces, starting with Guangdong, Fujian, Zhejiang. So SMEs are not eyeing for full automation. They are certainly looking for labor productivity or raising up the double productivity, but full automation or automation is not important concern for them, and as a result of it, it doesn't really reflect into their to-do list. The second question from Nirmal Panda with regard to common prosperity and Alibaba being cracked down. And so I will try to answer, I think, because there were a lot of questions you put together, but I will try to give you a general answer with regard to that. When Alibaba came, Alibaba became famous in late 1990s. It was a deliberate effort to get entity like Alibaba into the Chinese economy because the Chinese national banking was becoming lazy, inefficient, oversized. And to make them competitive, to make them understand that there can be competition, Alibaba was introduced. And I think somewhere there was a subtle interest by the political establishment to let private enterprises come and play a larger role. Over the period of last 25 years, private enterprises' role, stake, and influence in the Chinese economy has grown. And it has grown beyond a certain limit. And when I say a certain limit, you need to understand it politically. As a result of it, there was a rising caution from the Chinese state how to deal with the private enterprises. And understand one thing, whole anxiety towards Alibaba started emerging when Alibaba started getting into the credit business. Getting into the credit business and avoiding taxes was something technically folly, on the side of Alibaba. And as a result of it, it was fine as a reason to get on and, track what Alibaba was doing. And Alibaba wanted to do many other things which would have really complicated the financial system which China implements and China boasts all about. So the common prosperity was to bring the public sector and private sector at one level, and not to let private enterprises think that they have been given too much of freedom or legroom. At the same time, remember one thing: this was the same lesson the Chinese had given to public sector in the late 90s when they were telling the state enterprises that there is no enough legroom left for you. So be alert, improve yourself, get efficient. Okay. My answer to you, in short, Nirmal Panda, I mean, if I have left something, I'll get back to you on that later. With regard to Professor Adlika's question, yes, SMEs, they have been facing a lot of pressure as far as raw material is concerned and the accessibility to the Western market is concerned, Europe and Americas. And so they're trying to diversify. But this diversification has been very slow, because this diversification is coming at the cost of local Southeast Asian competitors. And SMEs in China are not able to compete with them because of a number of reasons. Because the cost factor, the labor cost factor, can be adjusted when the market like EU is concerned. But the labor cost factor cannot be adjusted when they're looking at SC, Southeast Asian market, or South Asian market is concerned. So there is a little bit of competition, little bit of anxiety in the minds of SMEs how to deal or readjust or try to diversify the basket of market. Now the question with regard to the two questions, one is Nasser Khan's question with common prosperity, and Nazar's question. Nazar, about overcapacity, why overcapacity? When overcapacity happened, bulging supply lines, it created more debt problems for the enterprises, and also a lot of issues, structural issues, as far as the provincial economies were concerned, enterprises were concerned. So improving on supply lines, getting rid of those blocks were important and resulted to be one of the important instigating factor to let the enterprises look inward and try to work upon it. Coming to Ambassador Khan's question about common prosperity has taken a back seat, but it has become one of the important connector when it was in recent times. Xi Jinping has been talking about common prosperity in his recent visits to Shanxi. He reflected about how there has to be more contribution by the provinces over the healthcare, over the education is concerned. So this has been sidelined, but if you talk about the total narrative over China's dream, shared prosperity, about rising level of unemployment, social anxieties are concerned, this is coming to the forefront again. May not be as forcefully as it was. but somewhere it has been talked, with regard to the balancing factor or with regard to China's domestic economic governance is concerned. I hope I have covered the questions.
Yes,
if not,
yes.
I'll come in the second round again.
Thank you, Dr. Yelleri. Dr. Ju,
Yes.
you take 5 minutes now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think both questions I'm supposed to answer are related to this common prosperity. That now is a hot topic in China, and also one of the reasons I'm talking about this future tax scheme design in China. Right now, frankly speaking, there's still, for me, I think there's still discussions on how to implement these policies, but there's already a lot of discussion in China, not only for the government, but also for its researchers. So there's several issues. First of all, what's the aim of this? What's the specific content of this common prosperity? I think there's still discussion in academic research. Is like even some philosophers are participating in these discussions, whether we should use utilitarianism or use Rosin. So-called Rosin is the maximum objective of this of these welfare functions. So when we talk about, when we say Rosin welfare function, that means we will improve the poor people, improve the welfare of poor people substantially. I think that is still in the for the academic research. There's still a lot of discussions, and then there's not until now we didn't see detailed descriptions of these objective functions from government report. So, but mainly we see like government already realized this income inequality, wealth inequality, and the poor people in the society, and that I think the impact of this large inequality have several. There's several impacts of large inequality on this economic growth. The first is the industrialization. Right now is we see that China's development is like a ladder for this so-called industry transformation. China first participated in this labor-intensive industry, then gradually moved to this capital-intensive industry, and finally, China still also want to participate in this high-tech industry. But when we want to jump from this capital-intensive industry to this high-tech, then we need a huge demand in the market or consumption market for this high-tech. But until now, we see like there's no sense to show that China has this large enough market to support a high-tech industry. So that's the reason is this income inequality. The middle income class still don't have enough money to buy this high-tech stuff. So that cannot support the industrialization, the final step of industrialization from the transformation from capital-intensive industry to human capital to high-tech or frontier industry. So that's one of the negative impact of this income inequality. That's why and then the other thing is the innovation. For example, like China has already have a lot of wealth. I mean, the capital accumulation, but smart people may not always grow up from rich family. I mean, from this, like for a lot of experience, like my classmates or like myself, we grew up in a rural side of urban side of China, urban area of China. I mean, we grew up from poor families, but that's because we have this chance to enter the university. That's where we can do research, or we can we can do research in this high tech stuff or in top school. But if later on, if the smart talent from poor families, they don't have enough money to start their own business, then that will heavily influence the innovation. Finally, that's why we see one of the reasons we see that the growth rate is declined because of China economy, because we want to switch from capital intensive industry to high-tech industry. So from this demand side and supply side, we all see like income inequality will become a key indicator, a key factor which influence this future growth, future economic growth of China. That's I think for me, I think that's one of the reasons why government want to pursue this aim of pursue this common prosperity. But to adjust this to pursue this aim, apparently China has to adjust its taxation system. I mean, then that still have huge difficulties. For example, like this property tax. I think, but not all of the economy have to use this property tax to sustain their growth. For example, like Hong Kong, Singapore, they don't have a high tax rate on the property, but they still have a good development. So I think one of the reasons we didn't, we didn't see detailed plans for this common prosperity. I think that there's still discussions whether China should follow the textbook or whether China have to or will set up a new system. I mean, mainly, like I said, we have to combine this market mechanism and planning economy and the so-called mechanism design. So which factor will final, I believe later on will be a mixture or combination. For example, if we don't use the high direct tax, the income tax, we have to have a very detailed mechanism design in the income distribution. For example, like a wage cap or profit cap. So whether China will use this, this is untraditional distribution way or untraditional mechanism. I'm still not sure.
Thank you.
Okay,
thank you, Dr. Zhu. Thank you. Dr. Zhang, I think I have to redirect one question to you from Ambassador Rana about establishment of party units. So along with your other questions which were directed to you, please try to...
So there are maybe two questions. One is about the party subsidiaries in foreign companies, and the other is there are several about taxes. So I was asked, because 1 out of 14, every 14 people in China is a member of the party. So many of them work in foreign companies. So this subsidiary mainly works as a party organization at the end. This, I don't think that's very special because the party subsidiary is everywhere. It depends on the size of this the number of party members in this company. If there are many employees of the foreign company working in one of the foreign companies, so there will be a party subsidiary. That's to my point, that's very standard, nothing special. And about tax, China has implemented a large-scale tax cut since 2013. Major events included like a cut of value-added tax rate from 17% to 13%, that's 4 percentage points off 17. That's very substantial, and also some cut in personal income tax as well as corporate tax for small and medium enterprises. So these are major tax cuts during the past decade. But meanwhile, the Chinese tax authority started to utilize the big data to more accurately collect taxes. There were many people, including the superstars, the actors, who tried to avoid paying taxes through somewhat tax planning or so, but through some big data of transaction, or the tax bureau can uncover how much these stars need to pay. So there were many cases, not only recently, but it's becoming more due to the utilization of the big data. Like 10 or 20 years ago, we also have some penalty of stars like tax avoidance. So that's about the income tax. As for property tax, inheritance tax, for property tax, my point of view is that because all the land was state-owned, so there's a problem of legitimacy in terms of property tax, because residents only own the property above the land, not the land itself. So how to calculate the value of tax base is the problem. And inheritance tax is a problem of we need to discuss this problem, but it is hard to implement, to my point of view, in China, because people can transfer money in advance. So it is not easy work. And my point of view is that we need a more balanced tax system, not too heavy, because if we levy too heavy tax, even to the wealthy people, they will be inclined to transfer their wealth overseas to some tax havens. So maybe a more balanced one, which is more incentive compatible for them to do some business and to employ more people. So that could be better for the goal of common prosperity. So that's my point of view concerning the taxes, and also the problem of common prosperity, which I believe Professor Yeri is very interested in. And I think that's my answer. If you have further questions, we can make discussions later.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor Zhang. Thank you all the panelists for answering all those questions. As we move towards a conclusion, there's a very important question from Professor Manoranjan Mohanty in the chat box. I think that's a good note to conclude this session. Is there any major economic decision expected at the 20th Congress, or maybe in the lead up to the 20th Congress, in view of several challenges, COVID, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war, and any other global economic trend? So this is to the entire panel. If you want to go first, you can just unmute your mic and speak. Otherwise, each of you can take 1 minute. That will be fine. Anyone wants to take this? Who wants to go first? Professor Zhang, you still
That's
have your
hard
mute,
answer.
mic.
That's very hard to answer. Shanghai is not experiencing an outbreak of COVID now, so I'm working at home. But I think that we need to make some change step by step towards the end of the pandemic. But I'm not sure whether it will be expected at the 20th CPC Congress. For the global economic trends, because all these questions are out of my research, I cannot give some specific answer. But I think we, as for China, we just work as our stand on China's own position we call it the inner 内循环, the inner circulation, or the outer circulation. So because China has become a larger part of the world, what we do is to serve the people, or serve the benefit of the enterprises within the country, So that's my answer. I cannot answer this question that much because that's
That's
out
fine,
of
that's
my research.
Yes, yes, absolutely. This is a more general question. Dr. Chu, your opinions. I can, of course, give you the liberty of speaking outside your expertise because this is just a question that maybe our Indian audience is very curious about. What are the major economic decisions you expect in the next few months?
No, I think one of the problem is still how to stimulate the consumption market. I mean, how to implement these subsidies. I mean, entrepreneur side or household side. But people, China seldom use this subsidy to the household. But if that happens, that would be a huge change for the economic policy in China.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Chu. And finally, Dr. Yellery, you can basically give your opinion and also sum up today's session. I don't think I'll have much time.
I don't think I will have more wisdom to share over here, but I think the two questions I think which were left out was by Ambassador Nambiar's question about property tax. Well, I mean, though it has been declared and was told to the provincial administration and government to, implement property tax, it is not that easy because remember one thing over here, a membership and all these high net worth people working abroad, and when they come back with the capital, there is a lot of expectation from them to chip in, to provide some kind of stimulus to the local economies, provincial economy. And I don't think the provincial government would go on very hard, and ask them to comply by. As a result of it, you would see that there are a lot of internal, denials from the party factions, party members, common people, ordinary residents to give away their, privilege upon a property which they think is their important means of investments and savings. So I think that is a major reason for that dichotomy. But in recent times, Xi Jinping in his speeches has been indicating that there will be more stricter rules with regard to property tax because it is something, the real estate sector counts approximately 30% of the country's overall GDP. So you can imagine how much wealth, how much money it has in that place. So I think I mean, I don't want to be prophetic over here, but that is one thing which Xi Jinping would try to focus more upon. Second question, I think, which was slightly left out was Ritisha's question about the income tax.
Arvind, it was answered.
It was answered. Okay, sorry.
And inheritance was both addressed.
Answered.
So
okay,
I
fine.
want you to focus on Professor Mohanty's question. Any major economic decision expected in the next few months?
So I was thinking, more kind of efforts will be taken by the state council to put control over the more expenses done by the enterprises and the provincial government, but also try to motivate them to, have a clear balance sheets. And that again comes to property tax and income taxes. Okay. Some decisions with regard to that.
Thank you, Dr. Yellery. I'll take 30 seconds to sum up. I think today we have learned that much of the blueprint behind the common prosperity goal is still a work in progress. There are a number of experiments, especially on the taxation side, which China needs to perform, whether to subsidize households, how to promote domestic consumptions, how to ignite SMEs to upgrade industrial transformation. So any of this could happen in the next few months, or maybe none of this will happen in the next few months due to the tremendous amount of uncertainty that everyone is dealing with. So I thank you everyone for joining this Wednesday seminar, and also the members of the audience who pitched in with their questions. I request everyone to follow this lead up to our conference later this year. We will have a number of events on a variety of subjects. Thank you again for your support and viewership. And this will be posted on YouTube. So please feel free to share the link with others who might have missed today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Professor Chu.
Thank you, Professor Chu.
Bye-bye.